So I'm glad you guys are here today. My name is Christina Rogers, and today we're going to be talking about the special needs student in the Sunday school classroom. And let me see. Oh, before we begin, one of the first things I want to do is I want to see kind of what you guys know about special needs and what you guys have experienced. So as a group, I'm going to give you guys a vignette, and I want you guys, I want you guys to read this, and I would like you guys to, as a group, decide which disability category you think this belongs to. There's 4 categories that we're going to talk about today. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Go ahead and have a seat wherever you'd like.
Are we doing group things?
Yes. Emotional disturbance, intellectual disability, and autism. Now, I'm aware that you don't have any experience with these, so this is just kind of to see where you're at. So as a group, if you would read that and decide where it goes. And I have some tape right here. Here's some tape. So one of you guys is the group members. Actually, girls, will you make sure that people get tape?
Tape.
All right, so I'll give you guys just a few minutes. No, just each group's going to need one piece. When they're ready, you'll see them. So you guys have a few minutes. So you guys have a few minutes to decide what behavior is described on your vignette. Go ahead, and we're just working together in groups. Have a seat wherever you'd like. And if let's see. There's a seat right here too. So you guys kind of decide which disability you think it is, and then I will be telling you more about the disabilities in just a minute.
So we're gonna say what are we working together? I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're working together as a group.
Okay.
Do we all have one of these?
No, you have one as a group.
I got these tapes. Okay. That's what I was.
So in your group, decide which behavior you think best matches the description, and then get up and tape it to the chart.
Read it so I would.
To a T.
So, I have been really distracted trying to count your words.
Don't just do it like whenever.
Okay, so I go up now and figure out which.
Nope, you keep that act. Okay, so your acting assignment? Nope, your acting assignment you hold on to and you keep doing that until probably about half an hour.
Okay.
And you don't have to count my words. That was just like a rough number.
Okay, because I can't think and count at the same time.
But you kind of get the idea though, right?
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
So whenever you guys have decided, go ahead and get up and stick it to the chart that you think best matches. Hey Luke, do you have a bell? Hi guys. Then we're going to be doing a lot of group work, and there's an extra seat in this group if you'd like to join them, and there's an extra seat in that group over there too. So if you want to join this group or that group, it's up to you.
That's everybody's first choice.
Michelle.
Nick.
Nick, nice to meet you. I'm Charlie. Charlie, Michelle.
We're at the Austin. That's my wife. That's my son.
You guys think this one is here? Yeah.
Oh, we're ahead of time.
Really?
Yeah.
How far?
Well, these guys are still working.
So in one of our groups, do I continue to do my little?
Yeah, just whenever.
All right, all right.
Okay, So as soon as you guys hear that noise, please go back to your seats. Okay, whenever you're ready. So thank you for joining my special needs in the Sunday school classroom. I have been a teacher for the last 10 years. I went back to college when my oldest son began kindergarten. I had the blessing of being a stay-at-home mom. And when he went back to kindergarten, I found myself at home with a lot of free time on my hands. And the Lord called me to teach special education because I have a real big heart for students with special needs. My oldest son has ADHD, and he's actually right over there. And he's actually leaning back on his chair. When he was in first grade, I remember walking into his class, and he didn't even have a chair. He was just horsing around. But he still learned how to read and write, and he didn't read until he was a little past 6. And sorry. I just have a little distraction here. So I've been teaching for the past 10 years. And I've taught students in special education, all the way from mild disabilities, students that you wouldn't even know have a disability. And then, okay, Luke, how about every 25? And I know, I'm really having to concentrate. Okay, so anyways. But honestly, that's really what it's like in the special education classroom. You do have students that repeat every word that you say, and you just have to. So anyways, our goal today in this workshop is to foster an authentic, positive, biblical relationship with children who attend Sunday school by understanding the varied needs of individual children with disabilities. This workshop will help you identify common disabilities and teaching strategies to meet the needs of all learners. So I want you guys to think about your experiences in Sunday school. And I want you guys to think of some of the challenges that you've had. And everybody is going to get a Post-it, and we're not going to do anything with the Post-its yet. But I'd like you to write down 1 or 2 of your most challenging behaviors, and then we're going to try to see if we can come up with some strategies for them. So girls, would you do me a huge favor? Would you help pass out Post-its and pencils? Yes. Give everybody 1 or 2 Post-its and a pencil. So there's that.
Give everybody a pencil?
Yeah, everyone needs to, well, unless they have something to write with already. If you already have something to write with, then you don't need a pencil. So on these Post-its, write down some behaviors that you've had in your classroom that have been challenging or that you've struggled with. Just kidding. Every day. That's how it goes.
It's the same person, so maybe you can give me some good insight.
I will help. Try my best. Okay. So, you guys have about 2 minutes to write down your behavior. All right, so Mr. Luke.
Yes, ma'am. You take that away from me? I don't blame you.
Every 2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay.
Is that better? Thank you so much. I appreciate it. All right. And you.
A bunch of little kids who act exactly like I do.
Yeah. Okay. And if you don't have one, no big deal. Now, as you're writing them down, I want you guys to think about how you felt when these children were acting like this and what your responses were. You don't have to write that down, but I want you guys to just kind of keep that in the back of your mind.
And that's just one of the Post-it notes or both?
Just if you have one scenario per Post-it note. It's okay if you did more. But Taylor, your mom said she was going to leave some handouts in here for me. She said she was going to put some copies in here for me, but I'm not seeing anything. Would you mind going to ask her?
I do know she ran all of them because I picked them up off the printout yesterday.
Maybe they're just somewhere that I'm not
They are
seeing.
somewhere.
Yeah, so she must have put them somewhere else. Hi, how are you? Good. Are you coming to join the special needs Sunday school classroom workshop?
No.
Which one were you looking for?
I thought she was doing the puppet one. It's
I-
after this one. Thanks.
Yeah, no puppets right now. All right. I do think it's after lunch.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, in about 30 seconds, we'll be finishing up with our writing. So you have about 30 seconds left to finish up your writing.
Were we supposed to do two?
You can do as many as your heart desires.
Oh, I only got one, but I only need one. So.
All right, so if you need more Post-its, I have some.
I'm so super excited that you're teaching us.
Oh, good.
I think this is really gonna help me.
Okay, so if one of the statistics that I found and I've seen is that 22% of Americans in the United States have been identified with a disability. So that's kind of a large population of people. So what is that, Mr. Rogers? 22% of Americans? Oh gosh.
Almost a quarter.
Okay, so 1 in 4 people that you see. So let's see, there's 16, there's about 4 people in here that have been identified with a disability. I know one has ADHD. So actually that's funny that I say that because the most common disabilities that I've seen over the years are attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, autism, emotional disturbance, and hello, Mr.
Do you have a copy that I can make copies?
Oh yeah, but I thought that she did, and I actually brought a copy just in case. And she said she was gonna make.
We made all the copies like a day ago, 2 days ago, because I got them off the printer and brought them.
Oh, you know, I just sent this to her on Friday.
Yes.
Oh.
But I mean, I was here working with her, and I got them all off the printer and put them in paper clips and handed them to Becky. So there's big piles somewhere.
I'll be right back. Christina.
Okay, Jim. So like 16, 17, 20. To round it up if you want. Okay. So the most common disabilities that I've seen in my career are attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, emotional disturbance, which I have a chart over there, intellectual disability, and autism. As a Sunday school teacher, I've been teaching Sunday school probably for about 20 years because I started teaching Sunday school when my boys went to church. And as a Sunday school teacher, I have mostly seen attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I commonly, often I will see autistic kids at church, but their parents don't always bring them to Sunday school because of the high level of support they need. But I would like to see that change because I think it would be really awesome to see them in Sunday school. Students with intellectual disability too rarely come to Sunday school, and emotional disturbance is very hard to identify just by looking at people. So you probably get mostly in a Sunday school classroom ADHD and emotional disturbance. But I'm going to give you a little background on each one of those disabilities, and you'll get a little cheat sheet to take home too. Now, ADHD is a condition that can make it hard for a person to sit still, to control their behavior, and pay attention. And I want you guys to think about that and think about your Sunday school classroom and think about a student that you have that's had a little hard time sitting still, you know, wiggling around on the floor, tapping their pencil on something. And I want you to think about this just for a minute. And I want you to think about if it was a boy or a girl. And what the research has shown is that mostly boys have been diagnosed with ADHD. There are some girls who display those characteristics, but it's typically something you'll see in little boys. And ADHD also manifests itself in 2 ways. There's an inattentive type and there's a hyperactive impulsive type. Now, the inattentive type will be the student who has problems paying attention. They're looking around, you know, a lot of times when they're young, they'll be like picking at something, you know, picking a little hole in the carpet or digging out the wall, flicking off paint, or especially in Sunday school, you should see some of the stuff they do to Bibles, and you're like, that's the Bible, guys, hold on. But the inattentive type, these little students can't stay focused, they can't stay organized, they get distracted easy, they lose things. And the students that have the hyperactive impulsive type are real fidgety, they squirm, they always have something to play with. Those are often the kids, like, I don't know if you guys have ever read Charlotte's Web, but Fern's older brother Avery would like have a frog in his pocket, have a fish in his pocket, you know, all sorts of gross stuff. So those are those kinds of little boys that you're like, where did you get that, you know, thing, whatever it is that they have. They're always running around, they're always climbing, and you can imagine that since they're running around and climbing everywhere, they're more likely to hurt themselves. So that's probably why you see a lot more little boys with broken arms than little girls. The students that are the hyperactive impulsive type blurt out answers, they talk a lot, interrupt others, and to be honest is that sometimes these kids with ADHD can be really distracting to the teacher. They can be kind of annoying because they're always taking attention away from someone. They're poking at other people, and they can be challenges to deal with in the classroom, especially when you're trying to tell your Sunday school story. And you know, you've got the kid sitting on the ground and there's a little boy rolling this way and rolling that way or knocking over a chair or something like that. So I would think by far that students that have ADHD are the most difficult to deal with in a classroom. And so we're going to talk about some strategies for how to deal with them. But one of the things I want you guys to notice about ADHD though is that kids that have ADHD, like I said, they're difficult to deal with. They can they take a lot of your energy, and so they end up getting in trouble a lot. And so in the public school system, I mean, I'm sure some of them go to private schools, but in the public school system, these are the kids that you'll see in the principal's office all the time. They'll be in detention, or they're always getting in trouble. So what happens is these little guys, because they don't conform to the typical school system, end up getting really beat down. So they have a high level of anxiety, and some of them end up developing depression. And it's really sad to me because these little guys that have all this energy really don't belong in a traditional classroom because they can't sit still. It's just not possible for them. And so in Sunday school, when you see these little guys, you're going to have to really make a point to give them jobs and to build them up and to make them feel loved, because out in the world, they're so beat down. And I don't have the statistics on me, but I've heard that a lot of these kids that have ADHD drop out of school early. They're kind of like on that pipeline. They call it school to prison pipeline, where they're always, you know, always in trouble. And so it's the regular thing, and they just think that's the way things are. And some of these kids have the highest IQs because they're very smart. Their brain thinks very fast. Like, I have one little boy in my class, and he has dyslexia and ADHD. So with dyslexia, he can't read. He's a 12th grader. And he's always in trouble, and everyone just kind of wrote him off that he was dumb. And so one day I was talking to him, and he was telling me how he has dyslexia. And I asked him what he learned, what he's learned about reading, and so we're working on it. And it is so challenging. He's this big old kid, and you give him the word cat, and he's like, cat, app. It's really hard for him. But I also teach math, and he's in my math class. And he's in the math class because I'm a special ed teacher, and sometimes we don't always have the same kids at our class, and I teach at the high school. And he sits there and he listens, and one day he's like, can I try that? And I had never really actually taught him this math, and it's algebra too. And I give him the assignment, and he just does it perfectly. He said, but can you read me the words of the problem? So I read him the words of the problem, and the numbers were there. And he solves them all. And I've never seen anything like it. But this poor kid is just so beat down because he has dyslexia, and he can't read, and he has ADHD, so everyone just is always sending him out of the room, like, oh, let's not deal with this kid because he's bad and he's dumb. So it's really important in our atmosphere when we get these kids is like to think, wow, this is a great opportunity for us to love these kids and to really build the skills that they have. So that's ADHD. The next disability we're going to talk about is autism. Now, autistic kids, or autism spectrum disorder, is a neurological disorder that affects their ability to communicate, understand language, play, and relate to others. 1 in every 110 children has autism. So there's 5 categories under the spectrum of autism. Autism, Asperger's syndrome, Rett syndrome, childhood disintegrative disorder, and pervasive development disorder. Most of the time you'll hear it referred to as autism. Now, the things that you'll see in an autistic child is that they really won't talk to you. They'll never really look in your eyes. They'll just kind of rock back and forth, and they'll look around like this, but they'll be listening to you, and they'll understand everything you say. Oftentimes with autistic children and ADHD children, you'll find that they have an unnaturally high intelligence, so they're just processing so much information, and you think that they're not taking any of it in, but they are, and they have so much filed away, and it's amazing some of the stuff they come up with. But with the autistic child is they don't really like social interaction. They have difficulty relating to people. They don't really like touch. Like if you go up to an autistic child and put your arm on them, they'll kind of flinch away, and so you'll notice that when like if you ever put your hand on a child's shoulder or something and they flinch away, it might be some kind of if you suspect other symptoms in with it, it might be a symptom of autism. But also with autistic children, they have difficulty adjusting to changes in routine. They have repetitive body movements. They talk about a limited range of topics. Like little boys, you'll find them often talk about cars. Like, have you guys ever watched Rain Man? And Who's on First? Remember Raymond would always talk about that. My little nephew is autistic, and all he talks about is cars. Every time he sees us, he says to my husband, "Hi, Uncle Nick." And then they talk about cars, and then he'll leave the room, and they'll come back, "Hi, Uncle Nick, let me tell you about this car." And every time it's the same thing, and you're like, "Well, you've already told me about the same car 20 times, but sure, go ahead." So also with autistic kids is they have a real sensitivity to bright lights, loud noises, and so you have to be very careful. And it's really, if you ever have a fire drill with autistic kids, that's like the time where you're like, "Oh my gosh, hold on a second here. How can I help this child?" Because the bright lights and the screaming bells are just too much for their poor little brains. And also with autistic kids is they have such a hard time making friends. Like they'll kind of play near people, but since they don't communicate, kids don't really like to play with them. And then a lot of more severe cases of autism you'll find is that they flap their arms a lot. They kind of walk on their tippy toes. And I have one autistic kid, and he's this big, giant kid. And he's real flappy, and so like he'll go like this, but unfortunately, he's like 6'2" and like maybe 250 pounds. So when other kids see him flapping, they're kind of scared because he's so big, and they think that maybe it's threatening. And so it's really hard for these autistic kids because when that boy is showing those behaviors, like kind of flapping and rocking back and forth, it means he's really excited and he wants to play. But the other kids are kind of scared of him. So he has a really hard time making friends. And so if you ever get one of those kids in a Sunday school class, that's another chance for you to really love on them and let them feel accepted, and don't show that you are afraid of them or anything like that. And then the other disability I want to talk to you about was intellectual disability. And these are kids that you'll see that have like Down syndrome, or sometimes they have cerebral palsy, and you'll see them in a wheelchair. A lot of times they don't communicate at all. But I made this little graph. I don't know if you could see it. But here's this little bell chart. And in the middle, where it's the highest level, is the average IQ. The average IQ of a regular person is about 100. For a really smart person, you're like at 110, 120, 130. And for a child to have identified as an intellectual disability, their IQ is at 70 or maybe even below. So think about that. Average is 100. Normal, or not normal, but people that are like quick and a little smarter than the average person are about 120, 130. and then these guys are down at 70. So that's a huge difference in the level of IQ. So what you'll find with these kinds of children is that they can learn something, but it just takes a really long time for them to learn. So you have to be very repetitive, very clear, take your time explaining things. And the fun thing about kids with intellectual disability, though, is that they're so open. They don't have agendas like some of these ADHD kids have little agendas to drive their teachers crazy. I mean, these are the kids that put tacks on your chair, because I've actually sat on a tack, and I knew who it was. And the little ones with the intellectual disabilities, though, they're just so pure. And like as soon as you see them, they're loving. Their face lights up. They don't hold anything back. And I would love to see more of them in Sunday school learning about the Lord, because couldn't you just imagine the most pure, undefiled love of the Lord than a kid who's already so pure and undefiled? And I just love that idea of having a ministry where you get more Down syndromes and students that have trouble relating. I think that would be awesome, but that's another topic. So anyways, those are the first three. But with intellectual disabilities, like I said, though, their parents don't often bring them to Sunday school. I don't know if you guys have ever had like a Down syndrome's child in your Sunday school classroom. But if you do, you just have to take it a little bit slower and just repeat everything a few different times and in different ways. And then the last one is emotional disturbance. And emotional disturbance is really on the rise, especially with COVID. On the handout that I'm going to give you, I have some statistics, but they were... Yeah. If you guys wouldn't mind passing this one out. On the handout, I had put that the 14.5% of parents have talked to their child's teacher about an emotional disability with kids. But since COVID, I know that it's risen, because I've just seen it so much more now. But things that fall under the level of emotional disturbance are obsessive compulsive disorder, PTSD, social anxiety disorder, bipolar disorder, conduct disorder, eating disorders, and psychotic disorders. So the thing is that with a lot of people have anxiety, but they have coping skills where they're able to push through it. And yes, what, Nick?
This is supposed to be double-sided, right?
Yeah.
It's missing the other
You got the ADHD and autism.
I'll go run it again.
Okay. That paper, the original, should have the other side.
I know
So,
it didn't. I don't
okay,
know
so
who ran
it
I'll go
only
get it.
ran the ADHD side,
Yeah.
so that's the other side. Thank you so much. And the other page was only one-sided. So with emotional disturbance is that the children don't have the ability to implement coping skills that a typical peer would be able to implement. And oftentimes, they can be very aggressive, very threatening. They're, how could I put it? Where the ability for them to have compassion on other people is lacking. It's very minimal. And you guys, and I'm sure you guys have seen this in your Sunday school class where you've had kids that they're just kind of mean. And it's really hard to relate to them and to love them. And these kids, though, use these, how could I say it? What's the word? They use the mask of hostility and anger because there's some kind of other root there that's really hurting, and they don't want to let that show. A lot of times if you have a kid, because sometimes you'll have kids with two disabilities, say they have a learning disability like the little boy I mentioned with dyslexia. He can't read. Well, he has anxiety because he can't read. Well, over the years, the anxiety has manifested. He doesn't have any coping skills for it, so he starts becoming really angry and really threatening, kind of like the school bully. And the reason is that he does that to deflect the fact that he can't read. So nobody knows that this kid can't read because he's always in trouble or he's really mean, and that's all they see about them. So that's just kind of one part of emotional disturbance, and there's so many more other reasons why a child would have emotional disturbance. But thank you. But the thing is with the kids with emotional disturbance is that if they get the right care, if they have parents who are really willing to work with them, and they call that a treatment plan, if they participate in a treatment plan, then they can have success and learn how to manage coping skills. And unfortunately, what we're kind of seeing now is, and I hate to say this and sound negative, but the methamphetamine pandemic, which really should have been called the pandemic, probably really was at its height about 15 years ago, about 15, 20 years ago. And a lot of these children were born as drug babies, or their parents were heavy drinkers, and the babies have fetal alcohol syndrome. And so they were born with birth defects that are not visible to the naked eye, so brain damage. And so we have a lot of these kids that have their brains haven't formed, so they don't have the ability to cope with anything. And the parents were, heavily addicted to drugs. If, they were going to have these kids with these addicted to drugs, I could just imagine that a parent who was willing to take heavy drugs when they were pregnant was probably very heavily addicted to them. So the parents don't have the coping skills either to teach the children the skills that they need to cope. So they need like a whole community of support to be able to be successful. And a lot of times parents don't know what to do. Maybe they don't want to. My sister was actually heavily addicted to methamphetamines, and she has 3 kids. And all 3 of them are a mess. I hate to say it like that, but they're a mess. Like my niece is 16, and she had really bad, her eyes kept going the opposite way, and she didn't know really how to talk until she was probably about 8 or 9. And my nephew is severely autistic. He could probably have a lot more coping skills, but as it is now, my sister doesn't have the ability to take care of him the way he needs to, because as a parent of a special needs child, if you are one or if you know of one, it's a lot of work. You have to really be on top of your game, and he needs a high level of support that she can't give him. So I'm not saying as Sunday school teachers that's your job, but these are kind of the things that these kids and these parents are facing. And so when they come into the Sunday school class, we just have to have a lot of extra patience with them and really try to overlook their faults and not accentuate them. And so that's what we're going to talk about next. So I'll give you guys a couple of seconds to look over that sheet that you guys got. And that way, if you guys have any questions about it, you can ask me. And when you have done that, I'll give you just a few minutes. I want you to take that Post-it note that you wrote of the problem behavior, and I want you to go stick it on the disability that you think that best matches that scenario that you wrote down.
she ran them all. I saw them and delivered them to her, and because I delivered them to her, I was like, oh, I want to make sure I make this work. This looks really good. So we made your handouts.
I don't know where they went. Isn't that weird? Well, thank you.
I don't know what happened. And then they reran them and didn't realize there was a back. So, but somewhere there's a big pile of a whole bunch because I think we ran like 30 or 40 of them each.
Yeah, she told me she was going to put them in here, but well, we're going to have a lot of extras.
They'll come up, when the conference is over.
Right?
They'll show up. Hey girls, I didn't get that other one because I ran to make copies.
Oh, I didn't pass it out yet.
Oh, you didn't?
Well, no, not the teaching strategies yet.
Oh.
This one I haven't passed this out yet.
They did pass it out.
Those two.
Oh.
Oh.
Oh, okay.
But girls,
I'm like,
speaking of though, now would you guys mind passing this out? I didn't pass it out yet, but we are actually going to talk about that in just a second.
Oh, that makes sense.
Well, luckily it's his room.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's not the first time that a cup of coffee or soda has spilled on the floor. Yeah.
Oh, you knocked over my coffee? Oh, that's criminal.
Uh-oh, for him, yeah.
I feel very strongly about my coffee. Who did it?
Taylor. Can't say.
Oh, boy. That's okay.
Oh, you did it two-sided to two-sided. That's awesome. Okay. So in about 10 seconds, and we're going to come back to our whole group. So isn't that funny that most of the Post-it notes are on ADHD? Lack of focus, shutting down, not participating. Gets up, walks around. It's okay. Oh, thanks. I really need to redo them. These pants are a little too long for any of my flat boots, so I had to wear high heels. Okay, so like I mentioned, the students that have these learning disabilities are often really beat down by the school system and their peers. And so when we get them in Sunday school, it's really awesome, well, especially for me as a public school teacher, because first of all, they're in Sunday school, so I can talk to them about Jesus all day long. And I love to have kids at school that come to church here, especially ones that are in my Sunday school class, because I can talk to them about the Lord in the public school system because we see each other at church. So it's really awesome. But in Sunday school, it's a really great opportunity for us to embrace those kids that are the very, very hardest and to really love on them. And what happens too is that with these little ones is that the most difficult students are the ones that you end up pouring the most time into. And after you figure out what works for them, they end up being your favorite students. Like you will never forget some of these little students that are challenging. Over the years, when I think back of the students I've taught, like the ones that really ring out to me are the ones that have, first it always starts out with a really challenging child is where like there's kind of like a clash of characters, what do you call that? Personalities. I'm like, not characters, personalities, and then we work together and then we end up just being super close. So one thing that I have found that's one of the most important things about teaching children with disabilities is that you have to find what they're doing right, especially with the ADHD kids. When you have the little one who's being really squirmy and can't sit still, the first thing that you're going to want to say is, hey, sit still. Or, hey, be quiet. And I've said, hey, sit still and hey, be quiet 1,000 times. But really, what you should do as soon as that little guy sits down, before they even have a chance to start wiggling around, say, I love the way you're sitting down quietly with your legs crossed and your hands in your lap. I can tell you are ready to hear that Bible story. And call them out on that, and they'll sit up all proud like, what? I'm doing something right. And they'll sit like that for maybe 30 seconds. And then you'll call them out on it again. But hey, 30 seconds is a long time. So call them out on whatever they're doing right. Like even if you ask them to write their name and like they're like, I don't want to write my name, and they got their pencil and you're like, okay, pick up your pencil and write their name. And they touch their pencil. You're on the right track. You're almost there. Good job. Now finish picking up that pencil. Like find the tiniest little thing to praise them on. And I have this little brochure that I didn't ask Peggy to print out because I just found it last night. But one of the things is when you're trying to find what's right and praise these kids is that they're smart and they know the tricks. Like they know that sometimes teachers try to use this trick to fool them into doing what they want them to do. And so if you just use empty praise like good job or awesome, they're like, they don't really even know what I'm doing. And they'll just keep on, being naughty. So you really have to be specific. And some good options of things to say would be like, what you did was kind and generous. Like really build your adjective vocabulary. And you improved since the last time. Say maybe the last time they made a chicken scratch on their paper, but this time they made a whole half of a letter. Like, hey, look, you made progress. That's great. Next time we'll make more or something like that. And I really like this one. You didn't give up even when it was hard. That's one of my favorites because sometimes it is hard. And sometimes you have to acknowledge to these kids, it's like, hey, this is hard for you. But you can, you're trying, or, no, I didn't even like that. Hey, this is hard for you, but I can see that you're trying, and I'm proud of you. We give them a little pat on the back or something like that. And the kids really like it when you notice that they're making an effort. If you just kind of ignore their effort or compare their effort to their peers, then it doesn't really work in your favor to get them to not perform like the other classmates, but to make progress and to learn. And so you really just have to notice exactly what they're doing and tell them what it is. And then to be very real with them is to notice like, hey, I noticed you're having a hard time sitting still on the carpet. And don't do it in front of the other kids. Always take them aside and try to find a quiet moment with them and say, what does your body feel like when you're wiggling around on the carpet? And a lot of the times the answer is like, I feel scratchy. And so you could say, okay, well, when you feel scratchy and you're not at school or you're not at Sunday school, what do you do to make yourself feel better? And a lot of times these little kids have coping strategies that they don't realize are coping strategies. Like sometimes some of them will say, well, like I like to lay on my back with my head in my hands, or I like to sit on a chair, or I like to lay my head down, and they'll tell you. So you can kind of take a minute to talk to the kid and see what works for them, and then create a little plan with them. Another strategy that works really good too, and mostly just for ADHD kids, but say you have really wiggly kids and you're on the floor, is if you have them lay on their tummies, they are less wiggly. There's some kind of scientific thing about the pressure on their tummies that helps them calm down, kind of like the weighted blanket thing. And so that's just a good strategy if you teach little ones that are constantly on the move. Let them lay on their tummies. Now, before you do that, though, you might just want to tell that kid that they're going to be the ones laying on their tummies, because I've had it where all of a sudden everyone's laying on their tummies and kicking each other. Oh, that was a mistake. A lot of the stuff I've learned is trial and error, and I'm sure that I have many more years of trial and error in my future. So that's how it goes. So the thing is, you just have to be flexible. And you just have to be willing to try new things, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. So anyways, back to teaching strategies. Oh, another thing that's really important when you're working with these children that have these special needs, especially with like your emotionally disturbed kids who are aggressive or who try to get you off kilter, who say things just to provoke you. Like, a lot of times they'll just look at you and say, I hate you. Okay. You don't even acknowledge it. You don't have to acknowledge everything that a kid says. And you can hear it, and you don't have to answer them, and they don't really know that you heard it. And so if you don't answer them, it just loses all of its velocity. It just kind of falls flat and disappears. So you can choose what you respond to. And so it's very important just to stay calm and take a minute to breathe. A lot of times when I have a lot of ADHD students in my classroom that are all talking to me at the same time, I just close my eyes and I just like get all their little voices and put them in filing cabinets in my brain, and then take one at a time and answer them. That way I could stay calm, because as soon as I start feeling like a little antsy or a little nervous, I can notice that my breathing gets a little more rapid. Then I start feeding into it, and this whole like cyclone effect starts happening where, have you guys ever had that where you've had a Sunday school class just spiral out of control and you're like, how did that even happen? Where, you know, all of a sudden the kids, like one little kid throws something and then all the kids are throwing something. There's cookies on the floor smashed up into the carpet and you're like, what? You know, that was just some animal crackers. So make sure that you do your best to keep calm. And sometimes you might even need a break. So hopefully you'll have someone like a co-teacher like, hey, I need a 5-minute break. And where I've done that too, especially with really mean kids who have just been provoking and provoking and saying really awful things. And I'm like, you know, I'm going to go take a break. And you take a break, take a breather, and then come back. So just keep that in mind, is like, if you're really struggling to maintain your equilibrium, just take a step back for a second and pray, of course. Never forget praying. And then ask for help too. Because sometimes I've had Sunday school classes where there's been like 1 or 2 kids who have just really challenged. I think that they had a little ADHD and a little emotional disturbance, because they would just say real mean things all the time. And sometimes, you know, you come to Sunday school and you're a little bit tired and you're a little worn out. And then you get the kids who are just provoking you the whole time. And you just might want to say to your pastors, like, hey, you know what, I need a break from this class today. Like, I don't know if you were in Steve's class, but his wife Rebecca was like, I need a break. And sometimes that's what you need, to just take a minute, let the Lord fill you up, and then renew your mind, refresh your body, and then go back in. And so don't feel like you have to just keep pushing and pushing and pushing when you feel like you're going to break. So take care of yourself and make sure that you are standing on a solid ground. Because because kids sense a lot of stuff about adults. They really do. They know the buttons to push, and they know how to get what they want. So you just have to be a little smarter than them and one step ahead. And also, we want to show that we love them. And when you do have a difficult child in your class, the other kids are all watching to see how you respond too. And you don't want to show them any, non-Christ-like characteristics or traits. You want to show love and kindness and peace and joy. So, make sure that, I have something to tell you guys about that in a minute, but make sure that you're filled up and you've prayed about your Sunday school class, and that way you're ready to go in there with all of your weapons in place, your spiritual weapons. And so, I don't know if you guys noticed a little while ago, we had a couple of people acting, and I don't know about you guys, but they distracted me so much. I was already kind of distracted teaching adults, and so having these guys in there, but that's often what it's like. And so what did you guys think when they were being distracting? Does anybody want to volunteer when, like, you heard the kid laughing or echoing? What did you think? Nick?
From an outside point, it was rude.
Yeah, it was rude? Yeah.
I didn't know they were supposed to be doing it, but yeah. It's rude.
Anybody else have anything to say? Did you guys think that distracting?
It was very familiar.
Familiar? Hannah works at the school too.
It's not new.
Yes, so Hannah knows that too. So the teaching strategies. So I have put this together for you, and these are a collection of strategies that I have used in my classroom. And one of the most important strategies is at the very bottom. It's 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 7. And I actually have this one memorized. And sometimes throughout the day, I will, pick a little part of it out. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love doesn't dishonor others. And it's not easily angered. So that is one of my favorite passages for dealing with these little kids with learning disabilities. And sometimes other adults. So things that I've noticed that work really well are being clear, being as concrete as possible, not saying, well, you could do this or this, especially with an autistic child. You need to go and do this. And then in about 30 more seconds, you'll say, you need to go and do this. And to repeat the instructions, but not repeating them, because I know sometimes after I repeat instructions about 4 or 5 times, I'm starting to get a little annoyed. But you have to remember with an autistic kid, they really need you to repeat those instructions 4 or 5 times because that's how long it takes for them to process it. So just being consistent and positive in your speech towards them. And even, like I have a little boy right now who has an intellectual disability. And I'll say, okay, it's time to take out your math notebooks. And we do this every single day. You walk in and take out your math notebook. And he walks in and he sits down and he's staring there. And then, I say, okay, it's time to take out your math notebooks. And other people have and this and that. And then about 2 minutes later, he'll be like, what are we doing? Where's our math notebooks? What are you talking about? And I'm like, it's time to take out your math notebooks. And sometimes I feel like being like, it's time to take out your math notebook. And I'm like, okay, hold on. And I don't always do this every day because I have had my moments where I'm like, you're supposed to take out your math notebook. And I'm a little grouchy. And then I pray about it a lot. But you just have to keep repeating it in a positive way and not take it personal. And kind of like you're just pushing play again on the tape recorder. And like the guy on the tape recorder, his voice wouldn't change to be a little more annoyed the second time you played it, would it? His voice would sound the same. So that's kind of how you have to be. And then also that strategy too of repeating directions in the same kind of tape recorder, not the tape recorder voice, but the same tone, is that when you have a child with like an emotional disturbance who does try to push the limits, you can say, the directions were to take out your notebook. Why do I have to do that? I don't want to do that. Your directions were to take out your notebook. And see, even then, did you see my tone of voice change? I kind of got a little snippy. But you have to just repeat the same thing so that you're not even changing what you say. Just be a broken record until they comply or until the class ends, which is kind of nice about for me teaching high school because I only have them for an hour and a half. And in elementary school, I had them for 6 hours. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a long day. But I don't know what kind of, with Sunday school, it's nice, it's an hour and a half. And with Sunday school, like I said, you don't really get those difficult behaviors. But another strategy is to be predictable. Like up here, I wrote down kind of what you guys could expect. And so now we're down here at strategies. We're almost done. It's going to be closing. A lot of people, I especially like to know what to expect. And so kids do too. And they can say, well, when are we going to do that? And then you can say, you don't even have to say a word. You just point to it and move on. And that way they can see and they can know what to predict. And a lot of the children that you see come in, remember how I mentioned, like they don't have the coping skills. They don't, they don't know how to regulate themselves. So it's really nice for them to be able to see what's going to happen. So they kind of like can control their environment a little bit and know how long like they have to sit still or how long they're going to be stuck in the classroom for, the sake of some kids don't want to be in there. So anyways, so having that predictable schedule, if you can in your Sunday school classroom, write down what you're going to do. Like in our Sunday school classroom, we have a routine. We walk in, take roll, pray, Bible story, snack, activity. That's always the same. And we have 3 rules that are always the same. Look at the speaker, raise your hand to talk, and I can't even remember the third one. Raise your hand to talk, look at the speaker, and only one person talking at a time. And so the kids all know that. It's simple. We repeat them. And then we have a consequence system. There's 3 consequences. 1, reminder, because sometimes they forget, and you always want to give them the benefit of the doubt. 2, consequence. 3rd, they go see Mr. Luke. I always tell them that. Then I never get to the 3rd one. It's usually just a reminder. And it's just very simple. Like, hey, reminder, 1 person talking at a time. And they're like, oh, yeah. Or, hey, reminder, we look at the speaker. And then a lot of times, too, you have to show them what the behavior looks like. And so if you have the little ones sitting on the floor, I always keep mine on the floor, but say even you have them at the table, and they're looking around and they're not looking at the speaker, I'll ask them a question. I'll say, hey, what did you have for dinner last night? And they'll say, like, well, we had pizza. And I'll be like, and they stop talking. And I'm like, oh, wait, what'd you have for dinner? And then they'll start talking, and I'll start looking around, and then I'll say, what am I doing? And they say, you're not looking at me when you talk. And I'm like, do you think I'm listening to you? And they said, no. I said, that's how other people feel too. And so kind of mirroring their behavior, but mirroring their behavior back to them kind of helps them to see what they're doing. Okay, so for our autistic and our intellectually disabled kids, give directions step by step. Like, don't say, go back to your seat, take out your Bible, and open it up to Luke. That is way too much. All right, everyone, let's stand up. Okay, now we're all standing up. Let's walk back to our seats. When you're back at your seat, sometimes you even have to say, okay, now it's time to sit down. And then, step by step and step. And before you issue the next instruction, make sure everybody's complying. And sometimes it takes forever and ever to get anything done. But what you'll find is that the more you kind of follow a consistent routine and do the same thing again and again, it gets faster. So what you have to do is, with Sunday school, it's weird because you get students all the time. You have to take that time in the beginning and let yourself take a long time building correct behaviors instead of trying to hurry along and letting incorrect behaviors be allowed for the sake of saving time. And I've fallen into that trap before where I felt so rushed, and then the next time the kid comes and you want the student to, listen to the story quietly, they think, well, why should I have to do it this time? Last time I could talk to my friend or do whatever I wanted. So it's very important from the beginning to establish norms. Those are called classroom norms of how you want your classroom to run. And we're almost done. So what I would recommend for you guys to do is kind of like take a minute and write down what your vision is for your classroom. Like, what do you want it to look like and how can you get there? And then set up like 3 little rules that you're going to want to implement, and then just consistently implement those. And try to keep it always the same. And we're running out of time, so let me just make sure I have covered everything. Let's see, really quick. Did you guys have questions for me? We have time, well, we actually have like 1 minute for questions. Nobody, no questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
What do you do with the inattentive child that is just zoned out and they're not engaged in?
Okay, so most of the time, and I guess I don't even think I wrote this down in my notes, and I'm so glad you asked, is proximity is the best thing. Is if you're talking to someone, you just walk over and stand next to that child, they will typically pay more attention to you because you're closer, but also you might have to modify your work and think of some more interesting activities. You have to think of like, what do you notice that child likes? Take a minute to talk to them and come up with a customized plan for that child. Like maybe they like to draw, maybe they like to color, or some kids like even like those little like fidgety toys, and like they'll have like a little fidgety toy while they're listening to you, so their body is moving and they're still listening to you, so they're able to pay more attention because they're doing something with their hands. So yeah, we call those fidgets, but you have to be really careful with those because sometimes they turn into, try not to get anything that could be airborne because it will get airborne.
Leave welts on somebody else.
Exactly. Like those new ones. Do you guys have one of those little ones? Have you seen them? They're like those little, what do you call that latex stuff? That soft latex, and it has it's like bubble wrap, and you can poke them.
Oh, puppets, those are so annoying.
I know, but they are.
So loud.
Yeah.
Stress balls work good too.
Okay. Yeah. Stress balls.
They're quiet and they can just do this all the time.
And then if you know that you're going to have one too, those like little stretchy bands that you work out with, you can tie them to the bottom of the chair, and then the little ones go like this back and forth. And I kind of like those because they feel nice on my feet. Because I like to be moving, like I'm always like crocheting or something, and I have to control myself sometimes when I have to pay attention because it's hard to sit still and pay attention at the same time. I like to be doing something.
So, I have a question.
Yes.
I have a student here in 5th grade who constantly up out of her chair, lecturing, she's standing right there, with just whatever random thing pops into her mind. What's a good way to kind of get her back focused working without like just humiliating or crushing or making it a negative? Because it's not like a behavioral thing. I think she just gets up and has something to say. It's not like she's trying to be defiant, but how do I address that without
I have kids like
breaking
that,
her?
and then I just say, you may not be out of your seat. Simple. you know, kind of like the tape recorder voice. I'm only
Yeah.
going to give you guys one to share. Is that okay?
Oh, yeah.
I use the tape.
One.
I use the tape recorder voice. You may not be out of your seat. Just have one statement that you use, and don't give anything. Don't say anything else. Just the one thing, and they know that they have to go sit back down. Because when you start like negotiating with them, then that's when things really fall apart.
It's over.
It's over. Yeah. Because you know what, the kids always win when you negotiate. And Hannah, if you want one of these, I'll give you another copy next time I see you. Okay? I'll bring you one tomorrow.
I end up telling him I do not negotiate chairs.
And so, you know, you just say, you may not be out of your seat, or your directions are to pick up a pencil. And your directions are to pick, well, I don't know where the pencils are. They're right there. And, you know, I really have to control myself and not be sarcastic, because sometimes you want to say something snide, and that's so ineffective. And you have to remember that love is patient. Love is kind. You know, and I think that we should go back and ask Paul to write, love is not sarcastic. I'm just kidding. All right, well, thank you guys so much for coming. I'm glad you guys were able to, hopefully you guys learned something. All right, thank you. All right, I think it's time for lunch. I don't know, let me see what the schedule says. Oh, cool, that gives me the time to put the classroom back together. You can toss that. It is so weird to teach adults that look at you.
Right?
Mhm.
Look at you.
Why are you looking at me? Oh, yeah, sure. And you could delete that video. Please.